What's going on, guys? Gaston right here, and I am in Zurich, Switzerland. I got to shoot with the Leica D Lux for a couple of days. And in this video, I am going to be covering pretty much everything that I have experienced with the camera after shooting 2,000 pictures plus. Now, if we flip the camera to the side, we are gonna find this little door, and there are gonna be two ports. One is gonna be an HDMI out, and also we're gonna have a USB-C port. Now, I didn't get any information, but by charging the camera, it took an hour from 0 to 100%. So I'm assuming that this one is USB-C 3 that supports the fast charging. Now, one of the things that is going to be different in this camera is the new support of DNGs. Now, on the Mark 8, you're going to have great level of recoverability of the highlights and shadow. And I have to say that I'm pretty impressed. You can take some of these images, you can recover so much details from the highlights and from the shadows. Now, I want to talk about video really quick before I continue, because this camera is going to have video support. Now, at the time of this review with this firmware, the video is pretty much capped at 4K, 24 or 30p. I don't know about the codec that this video is using, but I'm assuming that it is a 8-bit 420. And there are no options. You can simply select a picture profile. You know, I chose the standard. You can see some videos right now. And this is hand holding the camera. Panning. And walking. Now, one of the things that I want to mention is that this camera is not going to have IBIS, so you only have optical image stabilization on the lens. Now, for photography, this is going to be more than enough, but you're going to see that if you want to walk around with the camera, you are going to get shaky footage. You know, it's going to be good enough for video if you're going to be doing some pannings and some, casual shooting, or having the camera on a tripod. Now, let's talk about autofocus performance. And once again, I don't want to talk much about the performance because I was told that this is the firmware that is still in progress. But the autofocus, in my opinion, was fairly good. You just gotta make sure that you select the proper mode, because choosing the wrong mode can give you a little bit of a headache. Now, the one thing that I did test was face detection. I'm not talking about face with PH, I'm talking about the head and the eye detection. It does have it, and in my test, I have to actually be really close to the subject for the camera to recognize the face. And this one is gonna be contrast based only. It's not gonna be the face and contrast detection like we have on the Leica Q3 and on the SL3. So I'm assuming the Leica is still working on this feature, but the couple of times that I tried it, it kind of worked. I just have to be very, very close. And I'm assuming that they're gonna be improving this, once the camera gets released and the firmware, gets finalized. Now, the one thing that I have to mention is that I did not experience any freezing, any locking, any type of awareness with the camera. The camera actually performed every single time that I picked it up. And the one thing that is very remarkable is the boot up time of this camera. I shoot a lot with the Leica M11, and the boot up time in this camera sometimes can take up to 5 seconds. Now, take a look at this camera. From off all the way to on, it does it maybe in a second. So let's go 1, 2, 3, press the button, lens extend, and the camera is on. Now let's talk about battery life, because I was actually surprised about the amount of hours that I got to shoot with this camera before I have to charge it. Lucky and surprisingly, I was able to shoot with this camera on the whole time for about 3 hours to 3 hours and a half, and that's with the screen on. So battery life in this camera is going to be amazing, and it is something that I cannot say the same about a lot of the other compact cameras out there. All right, so let's talk about the ergonomics and handling of this camera. And I have to say that it's pretty comfortable. Even though this camera does not feature a grip, and again, just like the Leica Q3, the handling of this camera is really good. At no point I wish this camera had a grip, and I'm used to, holding these cameras like that. Pinky goes at the bottom, and on the M11 and Q3, I have this grip extender right here. And I'm assuming that someone, Leica perhaps, is gonna come with a solution. Now, let's talk about the responsiveness of this camera. And like I mentioned before, boot up time is really fast. Everything you touch on the camera happens right away. The screen, has touch screen, touch into focus, also happens right away. And one of the things that I like is that, they ported the menus of the Q3 in this camera. So to configure the camera to your liking is very simple. You press the menu button and you're prompted with a screen that is, once again, pretty much identical to the one of the Leica Q3, and it allows you to control things, touching the screen. Now, I found myself deactivating the screen, the touch functionality, because I like to have my focusing point right in the middle and then from there move if I want to. But because of the screen, in relation to the size of the camera, kind of like forces you to touch the screen involuntarily. And a lot of the times, I will find myself moving that focusing point. For that reason alone, I deactivated the touch to focus. And I believe that you can also configure a button in this camera to enable or disable the touch function on the screen. And I think that's going to be the best way to go by that. Now, next up, I would like to address a very common question that popped on social media. How does this camera stack up next to the Ricoh GR3 and the Fuji X100VI? And in my opinion, you could compare this camera because they are semi-small, but I don't consider the Fuji X100VI being a super compact camera that you can put in your pocket. Now, the Ricoh, yes, it is a camera that is smaller than the D Lux 8, but the D Lux 8 is not much bigger. And another reason why I don't think that these cameras can be compared among each other, or specifically the D Lux with the Ricoh or the Fuji, is because the D Lux 8 is going to have a zoom lens. And the question is, could I recommend this camera, and who is this camera for? And I think that this is going to be a very subjective question. I think that Leica has engineered this camera to be a companion to some of the other existing cameras. For example, if you own, a Leica M10 or M11 and you just like to rock and roll with one lens only, usually a 35mm is what I do, or a 50mm. And then, having the capability of, having those in-between focal length is actually pretty powerful. A lot of the times, I found myself wishing that I could go even further, or that I was a little bit wider. But guys, if you have any question, make sure to drop your comments down below. As always, I would answer every single question, one question at a time. If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done so. And until then, I'll see you on the next one.